In January 2023, three young kids were murdered by their own mother. Her name is Lindsay Clancy, whose defense argues that she's not criminally responsible for killing her kids because she was suffering from postpartum psychosis as a result of malpractice. Now, a huge debate has been stirring online between the importance of understanding women's mental health versus what is just wrong, irregardless of whatsoever factors may come into play to affect someone's reason. And before we get into all of that discourse and all of those details, let us first go back to that night in January 2023 to kind of unfold the series of events that took place. Lindsay and her now ex-husband Patrick decided that they wanted to have takeout for dinner, and so they arranged for Patrick to leave and go to the restaurant to grab the food. And so Patrick got up, left the house. Lindsay then asked him to pick up a stool softener for Cora, their daughter. So Patrick decided to go to the CVS that was about 3 minutes away from where they live to go pick up said stool softener. There's actually surveillance footage of him arriving at CVS, kind of going through aisle by aisle trying to look at the options, but the specific brand that Lindsay wanted him to buy was not available at the time. And so Patrick then gave her a phone call, was like, hey, if I see another brand, is this one okay? The prosecutors, while he was giving this witness testimony, had actually asked him about that phone call.
Can you describe that phone call for us?
It was very brief. I just said, I think there was a generic brand, and I said, is this one okay? And she said, yeah, that's fine.
And what was her demeanor during the call?
She was pretty quiet. It sounded like she was busy. I remember hanging up thinking she's probably in the middle of giving baths or something like that.
So it sounded to you like she was in the middle of something?
Yeah.
Were you able to understand her when she spoke to you?
Yeah.
And did she seem to understand what you were saying?
Yes.
And she didn't seem to have any trouble recalling why you were at CVS or what you were looking for?
That's correct.
Now, not thinking too much about how she sounded over the phone, Patrick continued just like he would any other night. He then goes to the restaurant, he purchased the food, and then he heads back home. Now, when he got home, the first thing he recognized that was unusual was that the house was silent. And I mean, you can imagine having three kids all under the age of 10. Silence is just the one thing you're not expecting to have inside of your home. And so immediately he could sense that something was off. He starts calling out to everybody. He starts calling Lindsay, could not hear from her, did not hear the kids. And so he started searching the house. And in one of the bedrooms, he noticed that there was a lot of blood that was splashed across the walls and the floors, and I think there was an open window, and when he looked through the window, that's when he saw his ex-wife laying on the floor looking up towards the sky on her back. And so, of course, Patrick runs downstairs, goes to Lindsay, basically checks on her, and he's asking what's going on, what happened.
Did you say anything to Lindsay when you found her in that state?
Yeah, I said, what happened?
And what was her response?
She said I tried to kill myself.
This is where Patrick first learned that Lindsay had attempted to unalive herself. So as any reasonable person would, he stayed with her, he called 911. It took about 4 minutes to arrive on scene. And once he got there, after she told him that the kids were in the basement, he decided to go in and start looking for the kids. And this is where it becomes horrific, because one by one, in searching the basement and then his office, Patrick is gonna find the deceased bodies of his children, except for Callan, the youngest, who was, I believe, 8 months at the time, who eventually died 3 days later in the hospital. And each of his kids had a exercise band that was wrapped around their neck. He found them with them laying on their bellies with the rope tied around their neck, as if you wanted to tie your shoelace, but you didn't add the bow. So once he recognized that the kids were basically lifeless, he then started to administer CPR before the first responders came in and basically took over. Just a point of reference here, the 911 call that he made was actually recorded, but it was so gut-wrenching to listen to, the way he was crying and just basically, one reporter puts it this way, the father in him was literally dying. The judge ordered that that call remained sealed away from the public just to preserve his dignity. And so after Patrick learned about the murder, the first responders arrived on scene. Lindsay's in the hospital. I think maybe a few days later, she actually called him on the phone. And during his witness testimony, he said that she actually did not mention much about the kids directly, but rather that she kept hearing a man's voice in her head, telling her that she needed to do what she did, which was basically unalive her children.
Our kids, she talked about what she went through.
And what did she say about what she went through?
She said she heard a man's voice telling her that if she didn't do it now, she would lose her chance or something like that.
And did she also tell you that she had had a moment of psychosis?
I don't recall.
Did she mention the children at all during that call?
I don't think so. I mean, not directly.
Had she ever mentioned psychosis to you before?
No, I didn't know what psychosis was until after this happened.
And while I was researching on this, I came across an article. A witness, Sheila Kavanaugh, who is a hospital chaplain, that was testifying in court that Lindsay actually told her the very same thing, that she heard a voice in her head and that she was even alluding to the fact that she was happy that her kids were now safe, as if to suggest that she almost didn't know that the kids were no longer alive. And so this chaplain had to, according to the article, testify that she had to basically say, hey, they are, safe in heaven, if anything, but not here on earth. And it's pretty horrific because Patrick, during court, when he was asked about, whether or not there were signs that existed, he reiterated over and over again that no one ever told him that it wasn't safe for his children to be with his wife. She has never expressed wanting to kill the kids. At best, she only had issues with sleeping and feeling extremely overwhelmed. Now, just as a reference, postpartum psychosis is a serious mental illness that should be treated as a medical emergency. It usually shows its head like maybe 2 weeks after a woman gives birth, and the most common symptoms usually includes delusion, mania, confusion, hallucinations, low mood, not being able to sleep. It's a very intense version of postpartum depression. It's not just feeling sad. It's not just having baby blues. It's incredibly intense, to the point where you may need to be hospitalized because you are that unstable. But despite the defense basically saying that this is what Lindsay was struggling with, Patrick, on the other hand, who's actually testifying for her, not against her, actually labels her as a very dedicated mother. He said she did everything for the children.
What kind of a mother was she?
She was very dedicated. She did everything. She started reading them books at 3 months. And she made up songs for them.
Now, what he does know was that after she had her third child, her postpartum depression symptoms, that's when they started to grow worse. And so as her symptoms started to worsen, they started to reach out to different psychiatrists to help her to get through this. This is why Lindsay's defense lawyer, Kevin Reddington, has been reiterating time and time again that Lindsay has been calling out for help and that she was struggling with this postpartum psychosis and was even diagnosed with bipolar disorder while being over-medicated. And strengthening this narrative was a witness, Dr. Philip Resnick, who is a forensic psychiatrist with expertise in postpartum disorders. And he said that he believes Clancy was frankly psychotic, at least according to this article, and felt what's known as a delusion of influence and an external force had taken over her body. Now let's talk about the psychiatrist, right? Because while this narrative is being pushed by the defense, the psychiatrist psychiatrists and the prosecutors are pushing back, claiming that she did not show signs of postpartum psychosis, not to the extent that her defense is currently portraying. She did not show any signs that she was going to be hurting anyone but herself. At best, she would always exercise logical reasoning and would often be able to keep up in conversations. And so the prosecution team is saying if she was really suffering from mania and psychosis, being able to can send her husband away, timing when he's gonna be leaving and carrying out these acts, that type of logical reasoning does not fall in line with what true mania and psychosis should look like. And so several of her psychiatrists took the stand as a witness last week. Some testimonies were more intense than others. Starting off with Jennifer Tufts, who probably had the most intense witness testimony against Lindsay, in the sense of how combative that testimony was with the defense. Essentially, she claims that she did not see any signs of psychosis in Lindsay Clancy. At best, she only recognized anxiety and the lack of her Lindsay being able to fall asleep. And so Lindsay was seeing her for a while, being diagnosed with different medications such as Prozac. But eventually she stopped seeing Jennifer and then moved on to engage another psychiatrist named Julie Paul. And Julie Paul is a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and she herself has also reiterated that she did not see signs of psychosis. As a matter of fact, she said that Lindsay never even told her that she had thoughts to unalive herself or unalive her kids. At best, she was only feeling overwhelmed. According to Julie Paul, Lindsay also mentioned that the Prozac that was initially prescribed to her by Jennifer was actually helping. And so Julie then decided that she was going to continue taking Prozac, and she prescribed her a 10 milligram of the same drug. Then came Rebecca Jolotta, a psychiatric nurse practitioner, which was the third psychiatrist that Lindsay ended up seeing in the period of November in 2022. During her testimony, Jolotta said that she performed a mental status screening test on the 29th of November because she wanted to acquire what she calls objective data to fully analyze the state of mind of Lindsay Clancy at the time.
Did you observe anything in which she displayed manic symptoms?
No.
What would be signs of psychosis usually?
Signs of psychosis, they can be sort of subtle. It might look like somebody's like responding to, stimuli in their head, like based on the way that their eyes are kind of tracking and they're not really paying attention. They may be quite guarded. They may have a delusional thought process.
Did she display any psychotic symptoms?
No.
Did she ever indicate whether she had a history of having suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation?
She did not.
Did she indicate whether she had any homicidal ideation or thoughts of harming other people?
No.
Now, while Jolotta did not recognize psychosis in Lindsay, what she did suggest was that Lindsay may be suffering from a bipolar disorder. But at the time when she told him this diagnosis, Patrick Clancy, the ex-husband, actually pushed back and was like, you know what, my wife does not have bipolar. And he completely rejected the idea of that diagnosis. Eventually, she stopped seeing Rebecca Jolotta, and she went back to her first psychiatrist, who saw her the day before she committed the murder. And according to her testimony, once again, she did not see any signs of psychosis, but reiterates that all she recognized was a woman who was anxious, was in some sort of distress because she was not sleeping, and she did not get any cues to say that it was more severe than what was actually being portrayed before her. Early on cross-examination, the defense attempted to prove that Jennifer increasing Clancy's prescription basically had pushed her over the edge. But during the redirect, the prosecution basically said that even though she had 30 pills in the bottle, only 8 of them were missing. In other words, it appears allegedly that Lindsay only took 8 of the 30 pills, and that wouldn't be enough dosage to push her over the edge. And so The question then remains, is she really suffering from postpartum psychosis as her defense is really and truly painting a picture of? You should know that while the case is being tried, Lindsay and her now ex-husband has actually raised a civil case against these psychiatrists. Lindsay's defense on Friday, August 21, basically rested the case as it's nearing its conclusion in court. And so in the last week of August, there will be closing arguments, and then there will be a verdict that will be given by the first week of September. And during all of this, a huge debate has been sparked online where you have some women who are basically saying that a lot of times people do not understand the severity of postpartum depression and how much that weighs on women. And then you have another side of the aisle who's basically saying that no, that postpartum depression is tough, but it should not be something that could lead you to basically wanting to kill your kids. And so just to kind of look at some of the discourse online around it, one person on Twitter says that psychosis is in fact not just hormone. Drug harm is also not just hormones. Two things can be true. The children and the father are victims, and the mother was a victim as well. So I'm not saying she goes home at the end of the trial, but the system failed her and her family. Another person tweeted, "This is one of the biggest problems we have in the world today. Men pretending to know about women's bodies than they do. I believe in science. If doctors say postpartum depression is real, I believe it. This doesn't excuse killing your babies, but it can explain it." And finally, Thriller the Gorilla tweeted, "Unpopular opinion, but blaming a crime on postpartum psychosis is like a man blaming his testosterone for rape. Hormones aren't an excuse for horrific acts. The victims are 3 innocent babies. Enough of this crap. And certainly may their souls rest in peace." My own personal take on this is it's very tricky. It's very, very tricky. I do believe that postpartum psychosis is real. I do believe that there are women out there who are struggling and do need the help, and where intervention needs to happen, it needs to happen. It is definitely kind of shady seeing how she has been going through medication after medication, and you know there's a part of me that is thinking by the time she got to psychiatrist number 3, there should have been some form of concern per se to say, hey, you've been through 3 different psychiatrists now, like something seems to be wrong. But when I get into the details of this story, I'm starting to understand that there was a strong concern that Lindsay had. She did not want to become addicted to her medication. She did not want to live off of them. I honestly cannot rationalize why it is that the psychiatrist would want to over prescribe a bunch of medications. That definitely seems weird. It is true though, based on the evidence that has been provided. There are text messages, her talking to her mom, her talking to Patrick, them being able to vouch that she's a good mother, that certainly she was definitely struggling. But it is equally concerning that there was no sign that, according to the testimonies, no one can say that there was a moment where she literally looked like she was losing her mind and in a state of mania. And the closest person to her, which would have been her husband, would have probably been the best person who could confirm that, hey, yeah, like I literally saw a moment where she was chipping out, you know. So there are these two sides of the story, and I really believe that the jury is gonna have a tough time just really sitting down and deciphering what is truthful here. This is definitely a case where the science matters, the biology matters, and it just, if anything, really tells us that there's more education that needs to be done around postpartum psychosis, postpartum depression, women's health, and, you know, when it comes on to having kids and just the risks that are involved and the treatment options, it definitely does give that indication. But I don't agree to the idea of making this into a motivation to push a feminist ideology or to tear down women. I don't want. It's so unfortunate that that's what the story has become, because really and truly at the heart of everything, the real victims are those 3 innocent kids who lost their lives. It's the husband who no longer has his kids, who probably, you know, I don't know how he is even, it's just the grace of God that's probably keeping him at this point. I don't know if he would ever think about having kids ever again. But 3 kids have lost their lives. They will never be able to grow up. They'll never be able to kind of experience life, to be able to participate in the very same debates we're having now. And so there's a part of me that has recognized that the true story has shifted, and people are now using this to fuel their own agendas on either side, and it's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate. I think we should just let this be, and let this story be one that reminds us that we don't take anything for granted. If a woman is going through something, do as much as you can to help her. And as a woman, do as much as you can to ensure that you are in a healthy and good place, so that you can also be accountable for yourself in the midst of all of that. If you're a medical professional, don't take anything for granted. When someone comes and sit down to you and tell you that they're not well, don't take anything for granted. And I'm not saying that the persons involved are taking stuff for granted. I'm just saying this is an example of why we should not. So in a nutshell, this is really what took place. I'll be monitoring the case for the remainder of the week going into next week. And yeah, I just let me know what your thoughts are, what you're feeling about this. If there's anything that I missed that you thought was very important that we should mention, comment down below and let me know. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this case.